All right, I think we are going to go ahead and get started, and I'm sure some people will join us as we are going. But I just want to first and foremost say today marks 1 year since the Belong Collective started. It's kind of wild to think that it's been a year. Yeah, it just flew by. I don't know about you guys, but it flew by for me. I feel incredibly blessed to be a part of this community, to be a part of just all the things that we've done over the last year. I would love to do a recap of all that. Quite honestly, that was part of my plan, and we'll probably do that in the next few weeks, maybe just recapping some of the big things that have happened over the last year. But ultimately, I'm really proud of this community, what we've done, what we're continuing to become, how we're continuing to grow. The generosity of this community is pretty phenomenal. I've seen it firsthand, and I think through our TBC Helps Fund, I've seen it through what we're going through with COVID-19. So like, I'm really proud to be part of the Belong Collective, to be the pastor of the Belong Collective, leading this group of people. You all are what make me proud to be part of the Belong Collective, and a year is a pretty amazing milestone in my mind. And so thank you guys, for those of you who have stuck by for this year. Thank you for being a part of the Belong Collective for this time. If you're just jumping on and you're like, oh, you guys are a year old, I just found you guys last week, well then, hey, welcome to the party, and we're happy that you're here. I do want to acknowledge that it's a little hard to celebrate right now. We are having our 1 year birthday, 1 year anniversary, whatever you want to call it. And there's an element of excitement to that, an element of joy to that. But with what's happening in our world right now, I don't know about you guys, but this was one of the hardest weekends to give a sermon. Just a heavy weight. And I almost feel bad saying that, because my heavy weight is not nearly the heavy weight that my Black and brown brothers and sisters are carrying. And so I don't want to trivialize or minimalize their experience, but it's just heavy watching what's happening right now. And at the same time, there's a sense that like this moment might be something that moves toward justice, that moves toward reform that's necessary. And I just want you all to know that that we're looking for ways that we can be involved in a legitimate way. I know if you watched the sermon Sunday, we gave a call to action, a very clear call to action. And this is our first of what will be many clear calls to action. The call to action we gave was to purchase the book Trouble I've Seen. It's written by Drew Hart. I actually have it over here. Hold on a second. So this is the book. I'm told that if you buy it off Amazon, you may have to have, like, they're out of stock, or the stock, they have to be restocked. So I don't know if that's accurate still, because I know Amazon's constantly restocking things. But I believe Alan posted a link that you can get that book at our the Midtown Scholar. So the link is in our Facebook group, not our Facebook page, but our Facebook group. If you need access to that link, if you're not in our group, or you want to get in our group and find the link in there, let us know. We'll get you that. But ultimately, we want everyone to buy that book. And if you are part of the Belong Collective and you cannot buy that book, let us know. We can help you get it. And yes, some people, like Sherry just said, yeah, her book's set to deliver next week. So what the plan is, because we recognize that some people are getting the book next week, we're not going to start this week, but we're going to start next week on Wednesday. And some of you still might not have the book by then, and we really apologize if that's the case. Hopefully you'll be able to kind of jump into the conversation and just join and listen, and then read once it comes in. But Alan is going to lead, Alan Fernandez is going to lead our conversations. I'm going to be there as well. We're going to have Zoom meetup gatherings weekly on Wednesday nights to discuss the book. And we're going to go through maybe a couple chapters at a time. I want to say there's something like 10 chapters. actually even less than 10 chapters. We're going to go through, we'll let you know what chapters we'll be covering that Wednesday night so that you can be prepared, you can have read them. We'll have some conversational questions that we ask, maybe an opportunity for you to share what about that particular portion of the book spoke to you, what you learned. But ultimately, we need to be people that step outside of our own experience, hear from other people's experience, and grow from their experience. And so the goal throughout this is to widen our experience, widen our understanding, and hopefully from that, just be more informed about, especially for those of us who are white, our privilege. And so I think this book is going to be a great opportunity for us to learn and grow, and it will not be the last thing, but it will be for us the first organized step, action step of many. And so I really want to encourage you, if you consider the Belong Collective your home, or even if you don't, I say this all the time, or even if you don't, I don't care, you're invited. We want you to take this seriously, to consider reading this book. If you can't get it delivered to you on time, I'm sure there's an ebook format available that you can read on like an iPad or even on your phone or even on your computer. It's a fairly short book. I want to say it's 200 pages or less. And it's very readable. I think when I read it the first time, I read it in like 5 days. It was very, very readable. You kind of get gripped into the stories and into the conversation. So just wanted to start there. Wanted to let you know we are a community right now, I think, for many of us in mourning, as we are a nation in mourning. And the church should be empathizing with the realities of people who are fighting for justice and who are fighting for reform, and who we should be listening to their experiences. The marginalized, those at the margins, are often in the scriptures, always in the scriptures, are where the heart of Jesus is. And so we want to be there with those individuals. With that said, I do have some legitimate updates. This was a meeting that I had scheduled before we ever kind of got into this broader conversation that we're in right now. And so I just want to make it very clear, like, this is something we felt like we needed to have a conversation about, because we haven't talked to you a lot about coronavirus updates. Pretty much what we said was, we said, we're not meeting because of this, and we'll let you know when we are meeting. And so, so we're going to shift gears now and talk about coronavirus and the PA plan to reopen. Many of you know the PA plan to reopen is red, yellow, green, and we're currently in Dauphin County. We are in the yellow, and we'll be going by Dauphin County standards, as that is where we meet typically, and where most of our community probably is as well. With that said, I want to start by this. I think we need a healthy theology of worship. So I just want, I'm gonna try not to preach tonight, okay? But what I want to do is I want to make sure we all understand a healthy theology of worship, as we have people all over the place who have opinions about churches gathering. I've got direct messages about people calling for us to reconvene our meetings, even very boldly telling us that we should. It's a biblical thing, and we should. And everyone has their opinions across the gamut. And I want to acknowledge that there's all these opinions out here, and you've probably heard them. And I'm not here to say someone's opinion's wrong or whatnot, but I do want to acknowledge what we're really missing right now, and help us form a good theology of worship. So, in the ancient world, in the time of Jesus, worship happened in the temple. This is where you went to worship. You would have synagogue worship as well. You would have a time in the synagogue, but they were all centered around places. They were all centered around physical places. And you had the Samaritans that were right next door, that they worshiped on a mountain. For them, it was, this mountain is a holy place. This is where we come, and this is where we worship. And so worship was very connected to the place in which you were as you worshiped. That's not very different for us today. For many of us, church is a building. I mean, I don't think that's healthy theology, but whether we like it or not, for many of us, that's theology we've either inherited, or just by default, that's where we've had most of our moments of experience with God, in those places. And so we call that our places of worship. And I think that's fine. It's fine that for most of us, maybe we connect with God on Sunday morning in community with our church, and that's fine. Here's the deal. When Jesus comes, he breaks down the system that says worship takes place in a building. He widens that. He actually, you could even say, breaks that down completely. So I want to read for you from Jesus' encounter with the woman at the well. So I'm just going to read. It's in John 4. It's in John 4:19. Here's they're having a whole conversation. We're not going to go into the whole conversation. I just want to highlight this point because I think this point's really, really important. He said, the woman said, "Sir, I can see that you're a prophet." So she sees Jesus has some amount of like, wow, you're pretty smart when it comes to these conversations about religion. Like you seem to maybe even be like a prophet. Our ancestors worship on this mountain. So she's like, this is the place of our worship. This right here, this place that you're at. But you Jews claim the place where we must worship is in Jerusalem. So she's talking about proximity. Like, you need to be in this place to truly worship God. And my people say we need to be in this place to truly worship God. There's a conflict that exists. There's a whole conversation and argument happening between these two people groups about where true worship takes place. Jesus knows this debate. He's heard this debate. He completely is aware of the conversation that the woman is bringing about. Jesus' response goes this way: "Woman, believe me, a time is coming when you will worship the Father neither on this mountain nor in Jerusalem." Interesting. Not many people were saying that. Then he said, "You Samaritans worship what you do not know. We worship what we do know, for salvation is from the Jews. Yet a time is coming and has now come when the true worshipers will worship the Father in spirit and in truth, for they are the kind of worshipers the Father seeks. God is spirit, and his worshipers must worship in spirit and in truth." Wherever we are, the Spirit is what Jesus is saying. And God desires, even the Father desires, that we would worship in spirit and in truth, where truth would be proclaimed and where the Spirit would be alive. Jesus is saying, this is with me coming, like my arrival, the Messiah's arrival. This is no longer the Father's anticipation that we would be tied to a building, that a place of worship would be the singular place where meeting God happens. Later on, James, the half-brother of Jesus, says true worship is caring for the widows and the orphans. Worship is linked to the way we love our neighbor. Like, these are the two greatest commandments: love God, love your neighbor, not meet for an hour on Sunday morning. Now, I say all that to say I am not minimizing our meetings. I think our gatherings are phenomenal. I think there's something we deeply need. I don't think we need them to worship, though, because worship happens in spirit and in truth. What I do think we're missing, though, and I want to be clear because this is something that I'm missing deeply, is fellowship, is the opportunity to be next to each other, to hear how each other's weeks are going, to comfort each other, to pray for each other, to like hear that this was a week of celebration for somebody, or to hear that this was a week of devastation for somebody, and to actually feel like we're carrying each other's burdens in that moment. This is a time of fellowship, and we deeply need this. And that is what we're truly missing. But I want to make it very clear. Worship can happen from your home. It can happen on your back porch. It can happen while you're driving down the road. It can happen while you're out in nature on a walk. You are not limited in your ability to worship Jesus. Worship happens, I'm going to say this, even when you're wearing a mask in a store because you care about your neighbor enough to say, if I'm asymptomatic with coronavirus, I don't want to be spreading it. And I want to love the people that I'm going to potentially come in contact with. And I want to love them so much that I'm willing to wear this thing that's annoying. Even if maybe I'm not at risk, I'm willing to wear it, even though it's annoying, because I love my neighbor. Loving your neighbor. Maybe you're the type of person who's mowed your neighbor's lawn through this. Maybe you're the type of person who's reached out to your neighbors and went and bought their groceries for them. We have many opportunities to worship right now. they do not have to happen in a building. And we're a community that, by the way, has for the most part worshipped in unorthodox ways, right? Like if you're part of our community, you know, we meet in a place that is a concert venue / bar and grill. Like we know that worship isn't bound to that place. If anything, we're bringing the spirit and truth of God into that place, and it's a beautiful, convergence that happens on Sunday morning in that place. So I just want us to begin by recognizing that worship can happen anywhere. What we are missing right now is fellowship. And that is a legitimate thing to be missing. And we have to acknowledge that we are created to be in community with others. When we are not in community, when we are in quarantine, when we are lonely, when we are in this place, it's not how we're designed to be. And it's hard, and I get it. And so that's what we're going to talk about now moving forward, about how we can get back to meeting together, but not saying we have to get back to meeting together in order to worship together. No, we can worship Jesus anywhere, anytime, any moment. So I just wanted to help us understand some theology around that, because I've heard a lot of things said about worship. Okay, next, I want to say this. Any plan for us to come back and meet together again that leaves our most vulnerable behind, to me, seems like bordering on an un-Christ-like plan. We need to find a way to meet as a community that includes those among us who are vulnerable. That's really important. Now, that doesn't mean we need to force people who are vulnerable to come meet, but we need to be making measures and making sure that we know enough to know that what we're doing in meeting is relatively safe, or as safe as we can be amid our circumstance, or that our circumstance is such that we should be meeting because we can do it in a safe way. We have people in our community who fall into the risk categories. We have a number of people in our community who fall into risk categories for a number of reasons, whether that is their age or a pre-existing condition, all kinds of reasons that people in our community are playing it very safe right now in the ways that they interact with people. And I want to honor that. I want to ensure that those people feel included. So we aren't going to be making any measures to meet again, to gather again, until after Green. And here's what I mean by after Green. The plan that the board has that we've discussed, and by the way, we've discussed all kinds of plans. This is hard. This isn't easy. I want to make it very clear that like this is a tough thing to lead through. Any leader in the midst of this right now should be given a measure of grace, because this isn't something that you have a plan for. Let's put it that way, right? But as we get into Green, what we want to do is have Green happen, and then we want to kind of sit back and watch. And here's what I mean by sit back and watch. Not sit back with our, sitting on our hands. Sit back and watch how other churches are doing this. Maybe I would even attend some other churches during that time to try to see what measures are they doing. How are they, doing their best to keep their community safe? And then we would wait a couple weeks to see what the results are of that. And here's why. The CDC has multiple statements about churches being spaces where this was spread pretty bad early on. And because you have a large community coming together, singing, for example, this is transferred through droplets, you're singing, there becomes a question of how we can do this safely and how we can ensure that it's not going to cause another spike. The last thing that any of us want to journey through is someone at the Belong Collective or attending the Belong Collective, or someone connected to someone attending the Belong Collective gets sick, really sick, maybe even passes away because of a measure we didn't take or because we met too soon. So for us, we are going to operate as if safer is better and doing everything we can to ensure the safety of you and your family. And so it's important that you know that's the posture we're taking. Whether that is a 30-day safer plan, like after we get into Green, waiting 30 days to assess, whether it's a couple weeks, we're also talking with doctors. We're having conversations with educated people in our community who are assessing numbers, who are talking about things, who are very informed. Let's put it that way. And we're trying to learn from them. We're trying to learn what we will need to do when we reopen. So even planning for that. So all of that means we want to take a posture of waiting, of hitting the pause button. Now, I want to shift and express some of the real challenges that it's going to be for a community like ours to re-meet, to like regather. Couple things. One, we meet at a venue that may very well have a policy of not renting out or not allowing outside groups to gather. Like, let's just be real. Like, that's a lot of policies are going to change about places that we once had access to rent, or at least I anticipate a lot of policies are going to change even as we get into green. What do those policies look like? Can we fall within those policies? And what are the challenges that might be represented if there's any new guidelines, new things that we will need to adapt to, whether that is even a heightened cost or a heightened restriction on availability. All kinds of things may show up that may make this hard from even another angle. Not the angle of not wanting, not being able to meet because it's not safe, but from the angle of, do we have the same kind of access to properties that we previously did as being a community that rents properties? On top of that, as we go into those properties have their cleanliness standards. And it can be sometimes that maybe those property standards aren't the standards that we would want to elevate the safety of our community. Now, I'm not saying that's the case, but I'm saying we want to be mindful that that's going to play a factor in this as well. And then, is the space set up in a way in which we can practice social distancing? For example, if our community shows up on a relaunch day, which I would anticipate could draw 100+ people, we can't fit socially distanced and stage on her at 100 people. Honestly, I don't even think we could fit socially distanced in stage on her at 70 people. We could in the ballroom, but sometimes the ballroom we don't have access to. Maybe there's another event going on in there, or there was an event the night before and it hasn't been cleaned yet. So we want to just express right out the gate that we're going to have to be having conversations with those who rent facilities to us as well throughout this process, and that's going to play a role. Some other things that we're going to have to consider. Are we going to require people to wear masks to attend services? That's difficult. I know how hard it is for me to keep masks on my kids when we go in places. I know how hard it is to wear a mask when you're walking through a place for 30 minutes, let alone for an hour of a gathering. We will need to practice social distancing, but for our community, and most church communities, but our community especially, we spend a lot of time hugging, handshaking, being close to each other. This is part of the ethos of our community, and that's something beautiful about the Belong Collective. But we're probably going to have to hit the pause button on that for a while, even when we do gather. For some of you, this is the deal breaker. We're probably not going to have coffee because serving coffee would just up the risk of keeping things healthy and clean, and just the potential for transmission. Are we going to have certain sections of the chairs set up in a certain way? There's just a number of challenges for us to meet again. That's not me saying we're not up for those challenges. We 100% are. It's just me saying we want to make sure that our community understands that for some churches, meeting again is something that might be far more simple than us, because they have a building. Maybe they've even spent quarantine reconfiguring their sanctuary to where they can meet in a social distanced manner, and they've done the hard work already for all of that stuff because they expected this, whereas we can't do any of the groundwork because so much of it is dependent on the venue and the process that we find ourselves in at that point. So I really want to sound positive. The hope is, here's the hope. the hope is that we can get into green as fast as possible, right? Like we want to get into green fast, but we also want to do it safe, right? So I understand there's a huge economic burden on so many people out there. And for many of us, we want life to be back to normal. I don't know that life is going to ever be back to normal. There's so much happening in our world right now. It's likely that a new normal is going to take place and then a new normal again down the road. And like things are transitioning and changing and evolving in a way and in a pace that is rough right now. And for many of you, that's hard. And to have an hour on Sunday morning to be grounded in fellowship and worship with your community is something we know that you desire and that you need, and we want to do our best to provide that. When we get into green, after we take our time to assess, one thing we're considering is prioritizing outdoor worship, because we feel like that is something that's in our ethos. We've done that before. We won't be having cookouts at those, which is the typical process, but outdoor gatherings seem to really reduce transmission. And so for us, we think that might be a good way to mitigate some of the risk involved in gathering. And what we want to tell you right now is, as we are in yellow, I've been having porch meetings with individuals. I had a porch meeting this morning with someone from our community. I've been keeping my distance in those meetings, and it's been a great time to connect with individuals. I think it would be really great to see maybe you reach out to maybe 2 people or 3 people that you're really connected to at the Belong Collective and say, hey, Sunday at 10, come over for coffee. Let's sit on the back porch and let's do church together. Like let's have our time of fellowship together. No, we can't meet in a space together. We can't meet as a community, as a full community, but you can still have fellowship with a couple of people. And those standards are going to be different for everyone. And I want to acknowledge that, like, I would encourage you to have your standards. Make sure whoever you invite, if your process is, hey, how seriously have you been taking quarantine? Before I would want you to come over to my house, I want to know that you've been taking this seriously and doing all the proper precautions. I totally understand that. That's why we're not going to give you like, here's the way to do this. But what we are going to say is do it in a safe way, practice social distancing. And it might be an opportunity for you to feel that feeling of fellowship and also have that moment of being able to worship alongside your brothers and sisters at the Belong Collective. That's a great opportunity. Or maybe when we have our Wednesday night Zoom meetups, you can gather together on the back porch for those as we're reading through the Trouble I've Seen book. Like, try to be creative, or just get together and have coffee, and don't do it around anything TBC's programming. Just get together and connect and ask, how are you doing? How's life? What's going on? Find ways to connect with people in the spaces in which we have access to right now. As far as I'm aware, in yellow, you can have a back porch social distance meeting. There is nothing that goes against the guidelines for yellow that I understand, to have a meeting of a few people on your back porch. So I would encourage you guys to consider how to maybe incorporate that into your weekly rhythm as a ritual of fellowship, because you need fellowship. And maybe some of you already have rhythms of fellowship, and that's great, but want to encourage you to do that. So the plan is to get into green and then do some observations. From those observations, the goal would be to begin with outdoor gatherings while we continue to research and figure out what we can do for our physical gatherings in rented spaces. I want to express one more thing. We are also going to have a legitimate challenge when we go back to meeting together. And I just want to express that legitimate challenge right now. We are going to go back to meeting together, and that's going to require a lot of energy. It's going to be different than planning a typical service, because a typical service did not require us to focus on social distancing. It did not require us to be hyper concerned and vigilant about health and safety the way we'll have to be once we regather. So that's going to take a lot of energy. We're going to need volunteers. On top of that, we've now tapped into a digital presence that we didn't have when this started. And multiple people have reached out and asked that we do not stop the digital gatherings, that we find a way to keep that going, whether that is us recording video of our gathering, doing that in a way that part of our struggle is that some live stream and that kind of thing is something we've wanted to do, but because we are a set up tear down church, it makes it really hard to add a whole nother team of live stream. And then you also have the reality that wherever you're renting from has their own internet, and that internet sometimes isn't as reliable. So would we record it and post it later? There's just all kinds of questions, and it's ultimately going to take a lot of energy. To be honest, I'm working more through quarantine than I was working before, because recording the sermons, producing them, posting them, communicating with the necessary people who are part of it, video editing, all that kind of stuff takes far more time. So we're going to need to figure out how to maintain our online presence for two reasons. One, because we're reaching people. And I'll share a story about that in a minute. And two, because some people that are in that vulnerable category may still make the decision to stay home, even when we feel like we have the safest plan to meet. They still may feel like, I can't go to large gatherings. And we want to honor and respect that and give them an opportunity to connect with us online. So just be mindful that there's going to be a transition here. And if you're somebody who has any background in technology, video, stuff like that, or are just a willing person to learn something, we're going to need some committed volunteers as we come back, if we're going to keep the digital presence that we've grown in this season. Now, I just want to quickly scan over an email I got. I'm not going to read the whole thing. I want to keep the individual's identity. You know, they messaged us on one of our boards, but I've been out of church for about a year now. This is a message we received via our website. Okay, I've only ever attended very staunchy, closed-minded, judgmental, and hypocritical churches growing up, into my teens, into my adult life. I have needed a serious break from the church, and this person then outlines how they've taken that serious break. All I have ever wanted is to be able to find a safe space to worship and experience Jesus and experience my faith in a church that holds to my personal belief and is LGBT affirming, welcoming, and accepting and friendly. I am on a journey to connect with God, and I was never shown growing up that the Jesus I know who is love. Then they talk about how they reached out to a friend, and our services, our digital gathering was recommended to them. The individual says, I researched your website and social media platforms and watched last Sunday's message, and I loved what I saw and discovered. I just wanted to reach out and say thank you for giving me hope for the first time in a long time that such a space that I'm looking for does exist. We've received a few messages like this in this time. It's been very, very encouraging to know that there's people that are connecting with us online that maybe gave up on church or didn't think a church like the Belong Collective existed. And I just want to let you guys know, many of you are sharing our digital gatherings on your walls, and people see that. You have a friend group, you have influence. When you share things, it connects with people. People maybe watch a clip and feel connected. And so keep that up, keep sharing. And I think we need to be in a mindset of recognizing that there are people right now who have never walked into a gathering of the Belong Collective, but over this quarantine have found what they would consider a spiritual home. That's an opportunity we don't want to miss in the future. And it's an opportunity that I would even say we might continue to have, even whether there is or is not a quarantine. And so we want to keep that line of communication open, these digital gatherings, find a way to do that and do that well. All right, so I've talked a lot. Now what we need to do is have some questions, because I'm confident I did not share that as concisely or as well as I could have, and that some of you have questions. Maybe there's even some things that I did not mention or or didn't go into as much detail as maybe you would have liked. And so I'm here for as long as you're here, for as long as you have questions, to do my best to answer those questions. And I just saw and I don't know if there's a lag time on me seeing your comments, but Luann says, thank you, TBC, found my new home. You have given me hope. Wow, that's awesome. So if you have questions about our reopening process, really, I'm going to tell you this. Any questions at all about TBC? We really haven't had like a town hall type gathering since this all happened. And so with it being our 1-year anniversary, I'm here for any questions. So shoot, send some questions. Just drop them in the comment section, and I'll do my best to answer. Let's hope that some come in. If not, I guess I was just so concise and, you know, well spoken, and you know, we don't have any questions. I don't know. All right, let me make sure I'm seeing the questions here. Yeah. Anybody, anything? I'm feeling pretty good right now. There's no questions. I want to give you guys time to type though, because I'm sure some of you might have long questions, or maybe you're processing how you want to ask it right now. That's fine too. Or I just did an excellent job. That's great. Okay, I'm down for that. Lauren wants to see the do. Oh, the hairdo. Okay. Well, there you go. It's yeah. If you don't know, I've got the old man bun going on right now. I shaved the sides. Brittany shaved the sides. Actually, I didn't shave them. Brittany did. So there you go. Wow. You guys are asking the substantive questions, wanting to see the do, of course. Crystal's got a great question. Will you be using Vomo for volunteers? Yeah, we put our Vomo on pause. What that simply means is we're paying a very small fee. When we went into the realities of coronavirus as an organization, we decided we wanted to do our best to minimize overhead costs, and so. We are still keeping Vomo. We have everybody's info in there if you've been in Vomo. Vomo is what we use to manage our volunteers. We'll be relaunching that when we relaunch and need volunteers, and we'll put a big call out for volunteers. Now, I actually just remembered something. Keep your questions coming in, but this is actually really important. I want you guys to know how incredibly blessed I feel to have been frustrated for the 5, 6, 7 months leading up to us being kind of shut down. Here's the deal. We decided to begin scouting for a facility back in September, October, and so we started scouting for a facility. Whether that was a facility we would rent or lease, we decided to just start looking at facilities, and I put a ton of time and effort into this, and let me just say, every door got closed. Like, outside of us, we were supposed to have a gathering at Appalachian Brewing Company the Sunday that we canceled for the first time due to coronavirus, and then we haven't met since. That was supposed to be at Appalachian Brewing Company to try out their facility for the first time. But that, you know, we were looking to explore that as a venue, but ultimately, like, that's going to have to be something we revisit. But we had multiple lease options that we looked into that all fell through. And I just look now and I'm like, I was so frustrated as a leader. And I just want to share this with you as an individual. When every door is shutting on something and you're just like, God, what are you doing? I literally twice came to the board and was like, I don't know what God is doing, because these seem like doors that would be great for us to walk through. And they just keep getting slammed in our face. And we would get not quite to the finish line, but we'd get seriously down in the process. And then it would just all of a sudden not work out. And I think now, back to that, and I'm like, wow, if one of those lease agreements worked out, we could have all kinds of overhead and no ability to access a facility. And I'm so thankful that God slammed those doors in my face. Like, so I just want you to know, if you feel like God's just slamming doors in your face everywhere you go, just have some perspective. Don't get angry at God. Consider how maybe God is protecting you from something that could come in the future. So I'm thankful that that happened, that God protected me. I also forgot to include that the Belong Collective did apply for and get a PPP loan. So that's something we did, that we had access to. We researched it and felt like it would be something that, with the likeliness that it'll be forgiven, for us to venture into. We feel very stable financially in this process. I meant to touch on that. We certainly want to encourage you to continue to give if you can, and especially give to TBC Helps. We're doing so much great stuff with that. We're going to give an update on that, I think, in the next couple Sundays. And but we feel very blessed financially. Many of you have continued to give, and even give above and beyond what you typically would, which during a pandemic, that's pretty phenomenal and amazing, and just, again, a testament to the generosity of this community. So, all right, I'm getting some questions in here. I'm going to go ahead. Does your comment about the use of venues post-green also reflect any continuation of exploring ABC as a venue? We want to continue to explore ABC as a venue. Nothing about this cuts off ABC as a potential venue. If anything, as soon as we turn green, we're going to reach out to them. We haven't reached out to any venues in yellow or in red, because the reality of it is like whatever policies they're going to have in yellow are probably going to change in green, and we would just kind of be, I would anticipate we would just kind of be annoying them, asking them a lot of questions. So we're waiting. We do still have a storage space where, you know, HMAC allowed us to store stuff. That's the only conversations we've had with HMAC, is to get in there and get some things here and there. But we will get back to conversations once we either get a date that green's coming, or once we are back in green. So, and ABC is still something we want to explore. Yes. I love the idea of small groups, like reading the book and then Zooming. That's great. Yes. Please, I just encourage you. I know we need fellowship. I know you need fellowship. Hopefully you're not doing life alone right now, even though so much of the way in which this has organized us has forced some of us, or pushed some of us, into a lonely space. And for some of you out there, you're listening to this right now, you're single. Like, you don't have family, and there's parts of me that envy you. Like, I've got 3 kids running around, you know what I mean? But there's also parts of me that are like, wow, I don't know what I would do if I was alone for 2 days, 3 days, 4 days. Like, I would probably go crazy. I would need my kids yelling in the background. So we're all coming from different experiences, and we all have different needs. For some of us, social interaction we need on a deeper level and on a more consistent level. And for some of us, we do fine being a lone wolf more frequently and then jumping into social situations. Please take care of yourself right now. Please have porch meetups, have park meetups if you don't have a porch or access to that. Practice social distancing, be safe, but find ways to connect, and just direct message people on Facebook or Instagram or wherever, and say, hey, I'm part of the Belong Collective, you're part of the Belong Collective, let's meet up. And hopefully that would be an opportunity that you could have to grow closer to one another in this time. Who knows, the opportunity might be that you guys both need each other more than ever right now, and your relationship's going to grow in a significant, meaningful way that wouldn't happen had we were meeting in large groups. So I want to think about that in this time too. Okay. Lynn, yes, Lynn resuming her role in VOMO. Yep. Once we get VOMO back up and going, we want everyone. Hopefully, we'll talk to you. We'll get that recommitment from you. But if you've had a role in VOMO, we want you to jump right back into that. Yeah, social distance walk to enjoy the beautiful days. Yeah, all these are great things that I'm seeing posted. I'm going to take a couple more minutes to see if any questions come in. I think it seems like I've been hopefully pretty covered everything, or covered most things. I don't know that I could cover everything, but most things. I do want to say this Sunday we have our final message in the series on Joseph, so I hope you can gather for that. I think it's going to be a really great message on forgiveness and just how Joseph responds as he reunites with his brothers. If you don't know the story, it's a pretty interesting one. So I think it'll be a good Sunday. But any last second questions here? I miss my TBC family. Nance and I have gotten together a couple times just recently. Hope to meet with a few more of you. Oh, that's awesome, Jan. I'm glad you and Nance were able to get together. Oh, Sherry asks, how are you doing? I'm doing good. I definitely, well, let me answer that two ways, because I've had a lot of people reach out to me and ask how our family's doing, how we're doing. If you don't know, Brittany teaches kids in China English. That's her job, so and that's all remotely, so it happens via like Skype type situation. So nothing has changed about her job. She's been able to stay steady, and the kids are done with school now. Last week was the last week of school for them. And you know, we weathered that storm of homeschooling. I was homeschooled as a kid, but digital homeschool. Brittany did a great job. I did nothing. I did a little bit here and there, but I did very little in comparison to what she did. And you know, with my salary staying the same and workload at TBC staying the same, we're doing well. We feel very fortunate amid a reality where we know multiple people are laid off or furloughed, or in a situation where financially they've had to make significant cuts. And so so we feel very, very blessed right now in our position, and we're doing well as a family, as well as you can in the midst of this. I do want to say, like, this last week was a very hard week for me emotionally. I have a huge heart for justice, and hearing stories from friends of mine across the nation, like Indiana, Wisconsin, California, like I've got friends in a lot of different places, and hearing their experience and the brokenness that they're experiencing, especially my friends who are people of color, it's a grief of sorts that's been hard to process, and I would assume that I'm not alone in that. I would assume that if I asked any of you how you're doing with that, it is not easy to process. It's maybe even not something we should be able to process. And so my prayer is for all of us to continue to call out to Christ and see what our role is, what our response is in this, and how to love our neighbor, how to act justly and to seek mercy, and to follow God. And I think following God means looking like Jesus and loving our neighbor. And in this moment, the church has a great opportunity to do that. And hopefully that would be something that might grow our capacity for love and our capacity to seek justice. So that's definitely been something that's been weighing heavy on me. But again, I want to acknowledge that I know for a fact there's many of you that this is weighing heavy, if not all of you. Yeah. So thank you for that question, Sherry. And thank you for your message about the sermon on Sunday. Yeah. That sermon is our most viewed piece of content that we've put out since Easter. So you guys have shared it, and it has been viewed, and we're incredibly thankful for the ways in which you guys got that out and the ways in which it was received by people. So thank you for that. Okay, we'll make this the last question from Lynn here. Do you think outside meetings will be primary and quicker than venue meetings at rental facilities, or maybe more meetings with smaller groups could happen sooner since 25 people are allowed now? That's a great question. We would have to run multiple services to do 25 people meetings, and we talked about that. Again, these are all scenarios we've talked about, and we're actually I'm monitoring other churches who are doing things like that, and just trying to see how sustainable that model is, what that looks like. To gather 25 or less people, it's still taking a significant risk, I think, in some ways. At least where we're at right this second, it might be taking some significant risk. And so coming together and saying, like, okay, will we have an outdoor meeting? The goal of having an outdoor meeting would be to be able to space each other out enough that no matter how many people came, I mean, outside of us having a very different influence than we had prior to coronavirus, that we would be able to space people out. And we could have 100 people in a park. Now, comes back to a question of, are parks going to be renting? And what are their guidelines going to be? Will they allow for 100 people in a church to gather in the park? I don't know. We have a lot of potential hurdles in the future here, but we will want to. Here's what I anticipate, and this isn't a guarantee. This is just what I anticipate. I anticipate our very first physical gathering back together will be an outdoor gathering, just because it will require, it'll just be safer. And so I think it'll be a great way for us to kind of dip our toe back into meeting and do so in a safe way. I think more people can be included in an outdoor meeting. It's you can keep your distance a little better outside. Yeah, I'm going to continue monitoring how other churches are doing it. If you guys see something unique that other churches are doing, like one of the things we considered for a while there was like, what does it look like to maybe do a drive-in church? We had talked about that. There's a lot of, things that go with that, a lot of technology, but ultimately, like, we're open to ideas. So if you see something creative and unique, message us, let us know. We would love to hear from you. And yeah, in the meantime, please stay connected through the digital gatherings, and remember that you can worship anywhere, anytime. Tailgate church. I like that. But you can worship anywhere, anytime, and that you can acknowledge your need for fellowship and find those times to find that space to fellowship with people from the Belong Collective. And so I'm going to sign off. I just want to thank all of you for being here for this. And again, we're going to post it to YouTube. I've got another camera behind this camera recording everything that's going to get posted to YouTube. And we'll share that for those who maybe aren't on Facebook or didn't have the ability to get on here. Obviously, this live stream will go, posted to Facebook. And just want to, again, say thank you. Stay safe. Stay strong. We will see you on Sunday. Love y'all.